guys, and welcome back to Beauty in the Bookcase, where we take a book and we make a look. So today's episode is all about Uzodinma Iweala's Beast of No Nations. Warning, today's video does discuss topics of war, violence, and sexual abuse. Viewers' discretion is advised. Now before getting started, I do want to quickly talk about the eyeshadow palette I'm using today. I usually don't talk about the products that I use, but I do have them all in the description down below. However, I have decided that moving on, I'm using a lot of products from very well-known major brands, but I would actually like to start using products from smaller brands and brands run by people of color. I think there's a bunch of channels already covering these big popular brands, and I'm not really paying too much attention to launches and stuff like that, so I decided that that's what I want to do. So today I want to highlight Blaqe Cosmetics Blaqe Power palette. This isn't sponsored or anything. I love the packaging. It looks really cute. I included their Instagram and their website down in the description below if you guys want to check them out and support them. I do think this is currently sold out, but they do have other really cool products, so you should definitely go ahead and support them. But anyway, let's get into the video. Uzodinma is actually a Nigerian-American author. He is also a doctor. So he went to Harvard, and Beast of No Nations is actually his thesis. In 2015, the book actually became a film starring Idris Elba, and you can actually currently stream it on Netflix. So the book takes place in an unnamed African country, and we follow a young boy by the name of Agu. Now, Agu's country has been ravaged by a civil war, and soon enough he finds himself actually being discovered by one of the, military forces, and he is forced to become a soldier. Living now in the midst of a civil war, Agu is forced to face violence, death, and all the other tragedies that come from having to live through a war. Now, when Agu is found, we actually don't know where his family is. So we're kind of wondering, okay, well, if he's here, is his family also going to be targeted? Are they going to become victims as well? But later on, we learn that his mother and sister were actually rescued by the UN, but his father and Agu stayed behind to fight with the rest of the men. Agu actually considers himself a good boy, and he often dreamt of being a doctor before the war started. He actually loved going to school and learning, and often just read the Bible with his parents. However, thanks to the war, Agu's choices were taken from him, and he's now forced to kill and fight. And the only reason why he feels that he needs to follow orders is because he constantly fears that any type of disobedience will lead to his premature death. So the first thing I want to talk about today is actually the entire idea of loss of childhood and innocence in this story. While we never actually get to know exactly how old Agu or most of the other soldiers are, it is inferred that at least he and another character by the name of Striker are children. And oftentimes after something violent or traumatic happens, Agu comforts himself with memories from his childhood. We see him going to school and even being encouraged by his family and teachers to become a doctor or an engineer someday. Even as a soldier, his main desire in life is to make his family proud, even though he doesn't really know where his family even is at this point. Well, that's not entirely true. One of the ways Agu is forced to grow up before he really has to is by witnessing his father's death. See, as the soldiers came in and started attacking the town, Agu and his father were running away, and just as they think they're safe, Agu's father is struck down and murdered before his eyes. And while Agu wishes to stay with him because he can't even entirely process everything that's happening before him. He just wants to stay by his father's side, but his father makes sure to tell him to run away and get to safety because he knew that the war was no place for a child. However, a lot of this ends up kind of being wishful thinking, since despite running away, Agu is soon found by some of these soldiers and forced to do unthinkable and unspeakable things for them. And one of the things that really stuck with me, and that showed how essentially how little his age mattered to the war and the soldiers themselves, was the fact that he went very much from being this innocent child who wanted to be a doctor, who sat around reading the Bible and had never really, you know, messed around with a weapon or anything, to being very quickly going up the ranks of this army. You know, he goes from wielding just a knife to ending up actually having access to a gun and just being one of the bodyguards for the commander. And this is really like mind-boggling to me, because it just shows how little these soldiers actually think about what they're doing and the danger they're putting these kids in. Because here's this child you had just picked up recently, and now he's a bodyguard. You know, this small young child now has to sacrifice his own life, not only to be a soldier, but to protect somebody else. And of course, you know, one might say, well, why wouldn't he try to run away? Why would he keep obeying? And at the end of the day, I mean, these are kids, you know, they're taught that they need to respect and obey their elders. They're taught that, you know, when an adult gives them an order, they need to follow it without questioning it, without, you know, trying to even be like, I don't know if this is right or not, because why would an adult want to put them in a dangerous situation? Why would an adult do anything that's going to be harmful to them, right? So really, he was left with no choice but to obey, and it was mostly out of fear. And a lot of this idea, I guess the reminder that he is just a young boy and, you know, he's being forced into these very, very harmful and toxic environments, is the fact that Agu doesn't speak, you know, he speaks like a child. The way his dialogue is written very much focuses on this almost broken English that carries with it an accent, but also just the fact that it's trying to tell you this is a child, you know, this is somebody who doesn't have this strong dominion over the language. Because, you know, he's not eloquent, not because he's not intelligent, but because he's so young that he doesn't, you know, he sometimes doesn't even have the words to express what he's facing. And another way in which we truly see that he's just a kid is very early on, when he's forced to kill an unarmed man. Agu has to come to the realization of what he's actually done, right? And in it, you know, he keeps repeating to himself, I'm a good boy, I'm a good boy. And he kind of rationalizes what he's done away as having had to have been the right thing, because again, why would he be put in this position as a child to do something immoral, something horrible, you know? And we actually see him often struggling with this entire idea of, you know, why would an elder put me in this position? You know, he often acknowledges that the stuff that's happening around him is off. You know, he's kind of like, well, this shouldn't be happening, or like, why would we be doing this unless it's the right thing? He's very much in this vulnerable position of trusting the people around him to be leading him in the right direction, you know, and he doesn't want to question it, even though he acknowledges that it feels wrong and it feels inappropriate and dangerous or toxic or, you know, just harmful, but he can't even say anything because there's still that innocence and that trust that comes from childhood, that unquestionable belief that your elders would never be bad people, I guess. But despite often just kind of going with what he's told and just following the rules, he doesn't seem to view being a soldier as this like noble thing. While we're often shown, you know, movies and books in which soldiers are depicted as these great heroes who never really question if what they're doing is the right thing, Agu is actually often just noting how the stuff happening around him and the stuff that he has to do is messed up and he doesn't like it. He doesn't want this to be his profession. Again, this is a boy who wanted to be a doctor. He wanted to help people. He wanted to save lives, and now he's taking them away, and that's such a jarring realization for him, such a heavy thing to process. And really, it takes a very long time for Agu to just walk away. Not only being a child, but also having been given the responsibility of being one of the bodyguards for the commander. He felt beholden. He felt like he couldn't leave. So it takes a very long time until he's actually freed. But even then, once he reaches this refugee camp that takes him in, he's still gonna have to carry that with him for the rest of his life, you know? He's still going to spend the rest of his days thinking about the horrible things he had to do and see. And now we've reached the point in which I'm going to talk about probably the darkest and most tragic part of this book, which is the reality that Agu and Strika were being sexually abused by the commander. Now, the commander, from the descriptions that we get and everything, was a fully grown adult. And he was grooming these children and doing horrible things to them. And they're described quite in detail. And I know a lot of people don't like reading that type of stuff, but these are things that happen, and they happen all the time. And I think it's incredibly important to read them just to give a voice to those people who are victims of sexual violence. And what's really interesting though is that oftentimes it takes victims of sexual abuse a long time to realize that what happened to them like was inappropriate and was wrong. You know, a lot of kids are too young to even understand what's happening until they're much older and they're like, oh, that was wrong. But Agu actually realizes very early on that what the commander's doing is messed up. He feels very uncomfortable with it and he wants to stop. And the only reason that he can't is because he's still in this vulnerable position as a child, and even more also, and you know, also as an underling, he feels like he can't really say anything. He doesn't have the authority to go against what this man is doing, but also he's scared. He thinks that if he speaks up or tries to put a stop to it or talks to anyone about it, he's just gonna be killed or, you know, face some type of retaliation and just put himself in more danger than he already is. And, you know, it's particularly disgusting that it's very clear that the commander isn't just doing this to all his men. He's only doing it to Stryker and Agu. So it's very obvious that this is a disgusting case of just child sexual abuse and a person abusing their power and their authority to do very disgusting things. One of the things that's particularly difficult, or at least it was for me particularly difficult to to digest was the fact that even though the commander was doing this, and even though both Stryker and Agu realized it was wrong, the commander, you know, when he wasn't doing inappropriate things to these kids at night, was, you know, he was promoting them. He was giving them special benefits and special rights to make them feel special. And sadly, that's something a lot of abusers do, you know? They make their victims feel like what's being done to them isn't messed up or a punishment or anything. It's because they're special. And, you know, these are things that happen, unfortunately, all the time. And like I said, we often want to turn from them, and it's especially true in the case of children. Obviously, nobody wants to even think about a child being abused because it's disgusting and uncomfortable, but it happens. And this story not only draws attention to the realities of children soldiers, but the reality that a lot of men, women, and children face all the time. There's a huge problem with sexual abuse in families, in the military, and oftentimes, you know, we're taking away the platform for men and for children to speak up because we want to go like, oh well, men, you know, men can't be raped, or, you know, we want to not believe children. I don't know why people wouldn't want to believe children. They unfortunately do it far too often. But what we do by not wanting to read about these things, by not wanting to talk about them, is we take away the opportunity for children to come forth and speak up. We take the opportunity away from victims who are in the military or who are really anywhere. We just take away the opportunities from victims to be able to say, hey, this is happening to me and it's not okay, and I want to know that you're going to believe me. So what's it really all about? At its core, Beast of No Nations is the story of the loss of innocence, trauma, and how harsh this world can actually be to the children who inhabit it. Adults who are supposed to protect children are constantly abusing their power and their authority to do disgusting, unfathomable things to the people that they're supposed to be protecting. This is the story of all the children out there in developing countries who are being forced to live in war, who are having their childhoods and their dreams stolen by war, corruption, poverty, and just so much senseless violence. As darkness continues to invade our world, I know a lot of us are turning to literature and films and TV as a distraction. And while I think, of course, books should help us feel better, I don't want people to turn away from books like Beasts of No Nations, books like Invisible Man, and so many other amazing pieces of literature that deal with hard and uncomfortable topics. These stories are important, and they need to be read, and they need to be shared, and we need to have discussions about them so that real change can happen. And so I strongly encourage you to read this book, sit in all of its discomfort, and find ways to help. In the description below, I've also included some links from different organizations about child soldiers and how a lot of children, especially in Yemen, are currently suffering. And I also have some links to places where you can donate to help them, help these children get. And I've also included links to places you can donate who are these organizations out there who are trying to rescue these children, give them their childhood back. Thank you guys so much for watching. I would love to hear your thoughts on this book, the movie, or really just this topic in general down in the comments below. As usual, if you recreate this look, be sure to tag me on Instagram. You can find my handle in the description as well. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe for more videos like this. And lastly, don't forget to hit that notification bell so you know exactly when I upload every Wednesday and Sunday, and I will see you guys next time.